Story 1. Am I the a-hole for calling off my wife's birthday party after she lied? I'm prefacing this by saying that I, male 38, have a daughter, Sandy, female 16, with an incredibly sensitive personality and loves to help people. We come from a well-off background compared to her friends, so for the past few months, she's been doing some charity work. She cut her hair and donated it to cancer patients, pawned her things and sold some of her expensive clothes, shoes, and/or gave them away to help out friends and other families. Now she wears thrift shop clothes, which is something my wife isn't so happy with. She thinks that Sandy was painting a bad picture of us as neglectful parents and giving a false impression to people that we're poor, when in fact we're doing well financially. I admit my wife is all about appearances, and recently I started noticing that she's been excluding Sandy from events and gatherings because of how she dresses. I talked to her about it, and she said it was all in my head. But last week was my wife's birthday. We celebrated at a restaurant, and I asked my wife to get Sandy and meet me there, although at first she hinted that if Sandy refused to dress properly, then she wouldn't bring her. But I told her that if she didn't bring her, then we'd have an issue and the party would be called off. We waited, and then I saw my wife walk into the restaurant by herself. I was mad. I'm not going to lie. I asked her where Sandy was, and she told me she didn't feel like coming, even though she talked about how excited she was for this party. I just had this gut feeling that my wife was lying, so I texted Sandy, and sure enough, my wife gave her an ultimatum saying either she had to wear something that matches our class or she wouldn't be allowed to come to her birthday where her friends and family are gathered. I went and called Sandy outside, and she was crying. I was furious. I walked inside the restaurant and picked up an argument with my wife and told her family and friends exactly why Sandy wasn't there. My wife looked shocked. She started arguing with me, and I ended up calling off the entire event and having everyone else leave early. My wife literally started yelling at me at the restaurant, so I took my stuff and went home. She got back and kept yelling at me for ruining her birthday and making a scene and humiliating me in front of her friends and family. She said that Sandy was acting stubborn and that's on her, but I told her she acted unreasonably by excluding her like that. Sandy was crying because of it, and I felt like this was too big to look over, despite my wife saying that it wasn't a big deal and ruined her birthday for no reason. She went to stay with her family and won't even reply to my text. She just reads them but doesn't respond, probably expecting me to apologize for what happened. Am I the a-hole? Did I go too far? I would say, what if you just decided to hold your tongue and let the birthday party happen with her there? Sandy would have probably been kind of devastated, probably felt hurt that this kind of thing was allowed to happen. This woman lied, and I think she got a warning ahead of time from this guy. Said if she's not there, we're going to have an issue. Plus the fact that she kind of lied to cover it up. Maybe a little too far, but really not by much. This woman was warned, and she's kind of really being stuck up about this. Story 2. Healthcare executive hates her own policy. This happened years ago. I'm an OB/GYN in a busy suburb of San Francisco. One of my patients was the vice president of a large health insurance corporation. She was a dynamic executive who climbed the corporate ladder quickly. One of her special talents was reducing healthcare benefits for patients. She initiated a policy where women who underwent cesarean section would be discharged in 2 days rather than the standard 4-day hospital stay. Shortly after having in vitro fertilization, she found herself pregnant with twins. During one of her office visits, I mentioned the new 2-day policy. I told her that for some patients it was really rough to be discharged after major surgery in 2 days and be expected to care for a newborn infant. She just smiled and said that she didn't get where she was in corporate America by giving away money, and patients just needed to suck it up. Health insurance wasn't meant to be a convenience. She was 42 years old and went to full term with her twins. Despite her age, she elected to attempt a vaginal delivery because of the quick recovery. Her labor was long and extremely difficult and ended with a cesarean section. On day 2, I went to her room to complete her discharge from the hospital. She said, "I'm not leaving. This is inhuman. You can't expect me to go home and take care of twins like this. I can barely walk. All you need to do is write a note in the chart that says I'm having a complication. My stay will be authorized." I told her that would be fraud, and I wouldn't be willing to falsify a medical record. Anyway, about a year later, the state of California forced them to reverse the policy. Oh, so completely the illustration, the literal illustration of the phrase, rules for thee, not for me. It just goes to show that stuff that is critical for people, services like health insurance, services that are meant to help people, are reduced to number crunching. And she just got a taste of her own medicine, almost literally being in a hospital. And thankfully, that policy was reversed. Story 3. Because some people mistook us for a bank and complained, the corporation changed the policy on $50 bills and $100 bills. Despite the big bold sign written in such a way that even the North Sentinelese could understand it, almost everyone with 50s and 100s thinks they don't need no stinking bank and will just go to us to get that big bill broken down. Well, it keeps wiping out our tills when they raise a fuss and eventually they call corporate. Their response was to have us rescind the policy and carry more money in the tills. Obviously, they've never worked a till in their lives. Otherwise, they would know why we don't carry disgusting amounts of money in the register. But they didn't tell us we needed 20s and 10s. So we decided to start some malicious compliance. We go to the bank, and their mouths twist into a grin like that of a midnight lichen rock when we tell them. We get dozens of 5s and 1s. And wait. First fracker walks in and smugly places down a $100 bill. His change is $95. Here we go. I started singing the Schoolhouse Rock song. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. He gets 19 $5 bills. He asks where the 20s are, and I tell him we're out. People keep paying with 50s and 100s and wipe out the 10s and 20s. Second fracker comes in and pays for a 50-cent cookie with a 50. When he gets 9 5s, he says he wants 20s. I informed him that he could always go to a bank. This continues for 4 more frackers. Take that. Very good. That is malicious compliance at its best. And you can always state it's a very good reason. Yeah, people keep coming to us to break down the bills, and we run out of the bills that you want, so you're getting 5s and 1s. Could you imagine running out of 5s and getting change back in 1s off of this? Also, good on them, but make sure you count those suckers out right and make sure the till evens out. Definitely. I mean, definitely be very good with, flaunting the policy, but definitely cover yourself and count. Story 4. The $15,000 equipment is too expensive for your department to purchase. Why don't you just rent it for $48,000 a year? Back in the days when 33.6 kilobits per second modems were hot stuff, I worked for the engineering department of a growing company. The company had started small. It was privately owned, and the VPs had all put in a portion of their own money to start the company. By this time in the story, they were finally making a respectable 30 to 40 million a year in profits. But they still acted like a small company. Penny pinching. Our engineering department was designing circuit boards with embedded computer systems. And to program these, instead of soldering the microcomputer to the board, we would solder on a microcontroller socket, then plug in an in-circuit emulator that would pretend it was a microcontroller and allow the programmer to create the required program. This in-circuit emulator, or ICE, was made by Hitachi. It plugged into a free PCI slot on your PC and had a ribbon cable that would attach to the specialized microcontroller die that plugged into the socket. It was a mess. It gave our tiny IT department headaches, and it cost $15,000. And it was an absolute necessity for most of our most popular product lines. And there was only one of them, and we were renting it. It cost $4,000 a month. The first month we had it, our CTO and marketing VP planned our whole new product line around this family of microcontrollers. So at the end of the month, us engineers asked management to buy this for us, since we would be using it for a while. The engineering VP saw the price tag and told us to just rent it. Surely we would be done with it soon. Engineers, being practical, forgot about the objection and just put our noses to the wheel. The CTO and marketing made plans to keep us busy using this microcontroller line for a while. They pre-ordered a few million chips. After a year, the VP of Finance asked about this recurring contract line item. They called the engineer who had originally started the contract. The engineer helpfully forwarded the approval from the engineering VP and his later email asking to buy it, and the VP reply where he demurred. By the end of the week, this toy was ours, along with a second one, since finance determined that product rollout was being affected by not enough access to the equipment. Hitachi just gave us the first one, stopped charging us, and never asked for it back. We paid $15,000 for a second one. No one got fired or demoted, but at the next department meeting, the engineering VP tried to tell us that we didn't have enough money to upgrade our PCs. Then that one engineer spoke up. Would $40,000 cover it? The company found the money. It's good that this was actually resolved quite innocuously, basically. It wasn't with a lot of drama, thankfully. It's always a good idea to look at something and wonder if it's better to buy it or rent it. Sometimes renting is feasible. If you're not going to be using it that much. But if you have the option, sometimes it's best to buy. When you have the option, I know a lot of things are getting turned into subscription services these days, and it's very frustrating.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 5. Either be fired or accept a massive pay cut. Okay, I'll take the firing. I worked for a company for 14 years. I loved working there for 12 of those years. There were two main parts to the job. The first part was the sales side of things. This was away from the office in the customer's location. This involved quite a bit of driving, and on a couple of occasions flying abroad to work face-to-face with customers to deliver a high-quality product. We weren't the cheapest, but we were the superior product. And I was the best employee when it came to delivering the product. I constantly got rave reviews from customers for my personal style when it came to delivering the product and executing the customer's vision. I got a huge amount of repeat business, and I got a lot of new business through word of mouth with customers recommending the company based on their experiences with me. The second part was the office side. This was my weaker side. I hated cold calling potential customers with numbers I found in the phone book. When it came to answering the phone and speaking to potential customers who initiated contact with us, I was fine. But I wasn't great at making the calls. This was my only real not great part of the job. So, in the office, I wasn't asked to make any calls. Instead, I prepared a product, designed a new product, trained new staff members, ended up being one of the biggest parts of my job. I was also the problem solver, helping out whenever and wherever, filling in for sick employees whenever I could. I liked the owner, and I liked the manager. I liked all the staff who were around me. All in all, it was a great job that I was really good at and took pride in. The company had been doing so well that the owner had slowly expanded over the 12 years since I started working for company. I had joined about 3 months after he started, so I'd been a part of this expansion. I worked out of my nearest office, but often traveled to other areas to train their staff. I was loaned out, as it were, to other companies to help train their staff. At one point, I was a guest lecturer at a university teaching medical students how to deliver complicated explanations to people who don't have the base knowledge that you yourself do. After 12 years, I was on a decent salary. Not massive, but I was happy. Then the owner decided to sell off part of the company. He was selling the area where my local office was. He told me he would love for me to remain as his employee, but I would need to work from a different office. That would either require me to move or to quadruple, at a minimum, my daily commute. The other option was to remain working from my current office, but with a new boss. I chose the second option. Before the new owner bought the company, she worked alongside the staff for a couple of weeks to see how we operated. This was before any of us knew she was about to buy the company. As far as we knew, she was just another employee, and she was shadowing us to learn. She came with me on assignments in the field and saw my abilities. When the sale was announced and we were informed she was the new owner, everyone was very surprised. She made some sweeping staffing changes. The manager left to start her own business, and since the new owner was also going to be the manager, a lot of staff were let go. The secretary, myself, and a couple of newer hires were kept on. The new hires were on the lowest wages, not salaries. Anyone who had got to a decent level was let go. Since almost everyone was on a 0 hours contract, she was able to do this. Whilst technically it was a new company, for the customers, it was the same old business. The company still had the trading name. The only real difference was that there was a new owner and the registered business name was now different. As far as the customers were concerned, nothing had changed. My job for the first few months after the sale was to train up the remaining staff to replace the more experienced staff members who had been let go. I recommended a couple of new hires who I had experience working with in the past. I was open and honest with the owner and let her know that one of them was a close friend and one of them was my girlfriend. Both were more than qualified for the work, and both were happy to join. My friend had recently come back to the country after a year of traveling, whilst my girlfriend could only work during school holidays, worked in a school. The owner gave them both interviews, then hired them since we needed the staff. Over the next 2 years, business started to fail. The reason was simple. The new owner decided to try and maximize profits by increasing prices whilst decreasing the quality of the product. For new customers, this wasn't noticeable. They just thought we were expensive and the product wasn't the best. But for old customers who had been with us for 10 plus years, they immediately noticed. They were being charged more and were receiving less and worse quality. So the owner doubled down and increased prices again. 95% of our old customers left us. New customers almost never became repeat customers. Complaints skyrocketed. Whilst all this was going on, our staff turnover rate was ridiculous. People left after a few months when they realized that the minimum wage they were being paid wasn't worth it. Under the old owner, the average hourly wage for new employees was around 2.5 times the minimum wage. This made people care about their jobs and want to keep them. My girlfriend quit. My friend remained, but was looking for something new. Then I got a phone call. The owner needed me to come to the office. This was unexpected. I had just finished working on location with a customer. My next customer was in 2.5 hours. It was a half-hour drive away. The office was about an hour and 10 minutes away from both locations. If I drove back to the office, I would have about 5 minutes in the office before leaving. My mileage was paid above my regular salary, so I was saving the company money by doing this. Also, parking was a nightmare around the second location, so I intended to get there as early as possible to find parking, then read a book. The manager didn't care. She needed me to return to the office. So I did. I arrived back to be handed a letter by the owner. It was informing me of a disciplinary meeting to take place in a couple days' time. I could bring a witness along, if I so desired. This knocked me for 6. I was the best employee. I read through her list of complaints about my performance and started working on my defense. At the meeting, I declined to have a witness. Instead, I decided to record the audio of the entire meeting on my phone without informing her. Where I live, this is legal, and I didn't need consent. The boss's witness was her friend, who she had met at yoga and hired for an office role, firing the secretary who had been there long before the takeover. Every point she raised, I could counter. They ranged from the week, you were unavailable to work for a week in August. I booked a week's holiday so I could attend my cousin's wedding on the other side of the country and turn it into a holiday. To the pathetic, you were late for work on the 12th of May. Is that the day my car broke down and I called the office to let you know? I don't know. I do. Here's the receipt from the garage, dated May 12th. To the downright lies. This one I can't write as a quote. Basically, she accused me of gross misconduct for breaking health and safety laws in the way I was delivering a product for a customer. I hadn't broken health and safety laws. I knew exactly what I was doing since, as I've mentioned already, I'd been doing this for 14 years at this point. She had witnessed me do this on multiple occasions and had never mentioned it before, because it wasn't an issue. She even had me train staff in this specific delivery method, because it wasn't an issue. She finished her list by telling me that she doesn't want to lose me, but she can't justify keeping such a poor employee at my current salary. I had 2 choices. I could either sign a 0-hours contract and work for minimum wage, or she could fire me with 2 weeks' notice. I countered that she would have to give me 12 weeks' notice, since my contract guaranteed me 1 week's notice for every year of employment up to a maximum of 12. She argued that I had only been her employee for 2 years, since before then I worked for the previous owner. I informed her that with how the business takeover had run, it counts as continuous employment. I quoted the exact law and code that backed me up. She asked for a 30-minute break in the meeting to let me think about her offer. She went to call her lawyer. When she came back, she informed me that since she was firing me for gross misconduct, she didn't have to give me any notice at all. If I wanted to remain and move to the 0-hours contract, I could do that today. But if I didn't, then she would have to fire me. But because she was nice, she would give me the 2 weeks' notice. I asked for a couple of hours to go home and think about this. She allowed this. I knew the reason she wanted me to remain for at least 2 weeks was because one of our few remaining bigger customers was set to have a product delivery for me at that time. They would only work with me. The owner had tried sending other staff in my place on several occasions, and each time there had been problems. It wasn't the staff's fault. It was just a very difficult delivery for a very specific customer, which needed to be perfect. As a result, this customer would only deal with me. I called the office and spoke to the owner. I declined the offer of a 0-hours contract and said I would be leaving. She then said she was giving me my 2 weeks' notice. I declined her offer of 2 weeks' notice. I informed her that if I was being fired for gross misconduct, then surely I cannot be relied upon to safely deliver the product. Therefore, it would be best for everyone involved if I didn't return to work. She panicked and said that she needed me for those 2 weeks. I feigned ignorance and let her know that I was just thinking about what's best for the company. After all, you can't have unsafe staff delivering your product to your customers. However, if she wanted to rethink the gross misconduct accusation, Then I would work my 12 weeks notice. They were her options. 0 weeks or 12. She chose 12. For those 12 weeks, I worked the same way I had for 14 years. I didn't coast. I didn't slack. I didn't badmouth the company on my way out. I continued to train new staff. I continued to deliver the product in my own personal, exceptional way. I also got in touch with a lawyer who was a specialist in employment law. For those 12 weeks, the owner barely spoke to me. She resented the fact that I knew my legal rights and didn't just believe her lies. She hated the fact that I could defend myself. She was petty. She accidentally dropped my mug in the kitchen, breaking it. Most petty of all, she paid for every member of staff in the office to have a spa day. Except me. I was asked to work my day off to answer the phones whilst everyone else was being pampered. Nobody knew I hadn't been invited until they arrived at the spa and I wasn't there. Here's the thing. I'm a big fat bearded guy. I have no interest in a spa day. If she had offered it to me, I would have thanked her and declined the kind offer. But by pointedly excluding me, she was making herself look terrible. For the last 2 weeks, I was training up my friend to basically take over for me. At the end of the 12 weeks, my final day came around. The owner had nothing planned. Not so much as a card after 14 years. 2 for her. The office assistant manager, who had become a friend, had gotten me some presents, but had to give them to me once the boss was gone for fear of reprisals. Excuse me. The day after my final day, 2 things happened. The first was my friend who I had been training to replace me with. He was on a 0 hours contract, so required no notice. He was unhappy with her treatment of me and was unhappy that she expected him to do my previous salaried job for minimum wage. He hadn't informed me of his plans to leave, and I only learned of it when he knocked on my door in the middle of the day when he should have been at work to let me know. The second was the owner received a letter informing her that I was bringing legal proceedings against her for constructive dismissal, unfair dismissal. I had arranged this with my lawyer to be delivered the day after my final day. According to the office assistant, she went pale and started crying before leaving the office to call her lawyer. She refuted my claims for constructive unfair dismissal, said it was gross misconduct, tried to come up with some more reasons for firing me. But the truth was that the company was making less money because of her business practices, and I was the highest and only salary. I had evidence that I was a great employee. I had evidence that she asked me to move to a 0 hours contract. She initially tried to deny this, since the gross misconduct fabrication makes no sense if she wanted me to stay. But once my lawyer provided hers with a transcript of the entire meeting along with a copy of the recording, she knew she was fracked. Still, she let the case drag on for over a year. I think she hoped that the legal fees would lead to me dropping the case. Little did she know my lawyer was working on a no-win, no-fee basis, whilst hers wasn't. She ended up settling out of court. The aftermath. The office assistant, who had become a friend, quit a couple months after I left. She hated how I was treated and didn't feel safe working for such an untrustworthy boss. Several former customers contacted me personally to inquire why I was no longer with the company. Apparently, the owner was telling them that I just quit. I informed them that I had been fired for cost-cutting reasons. They moved their business elsewhere. Several offered me jobs. One went so far as to offer me a part-time job and then pay for me to attend college to earn a degree required for them to hire me full-time. This was a lovely offer, but they were one of the customers who were a bit too far away to commute, and I wasn't ready to move. In the end, I found a new job in a different industry where a lot of my skills transferred over. currently earning more than I was, working less hours, and for better owners. The business is floundering. COVID left the new owner desperate for cash. She canceled orders but refused to refund customers' money, citing an act of God clause in the contracts. The business Facebook and Google reviews have tanked. Most of the staff had left. The business is still afloat, but barely. Too long didn't read. Owner fired me as a cost-cutting measure. I sued, and they ended up settling out of court, whilst the person they planned to replace me with quit. Yes, again. Document everything. Even those people who have worked at a place for years aren't safe. Just cover your butt. And this is a very extreme example of this person just trying to do everything to min-max profit versus costs. And they just made all the wrong decisions. Just letting go of everybody that made the company run. Just truly awful. I mean, I would just really hope this person doesn't end up running another business for the rest of their life.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.